So you're probably wondering to yourself, what are the best encounters for a Pokemon Platinum Hardcore Nuzlocke? What Pokemon go for what battles? How can I get through this game easily? Well, let me tell you, this video might just be for you. I'm HeyBoy Blue, and here is the Pokemon Platinum in-game encounter tier list. And let us start with my favorite starter of all time, Torterra. Torterra is actually pretty viable. You know, grass stars usually aren't that great in regions, but Torterra is, and that's because of Stab Earthquake, which it gets at level 32. And what is Torterra good for? It's good for Roark, it can do some work against Fantina with Bite, it's good for melee because it counters her Lucario completely because you get it at level 32, which is the hardcore level cap for melee. It's good against Wake, just watch out for Ice Fang, it's good against Byron, good against Volkner, good against Bertha. It can put in some work against Flint, even though I wouldn't really suggest it, and in a pinch it can do things against Lucian. And yeah, so Torterra definitely gets an A tier. It's probably lower A tier, unfortunately, even though it's my favorite starter. I have to say it's about lower A tier, which sucks, but of course this is all based on, it's still completely viable. Infernape is S tier. It's definitely the best starter. Firefighting is an insane stab combo, and because Pokemon Platinum has a dearth of fire types, it's actually really, really good. It's really fast, there's not much that outspeeds it in the entire game, and it's really strong. You can go either physical or special, gets a bunch of fun moves, gets Fake Out, gets the elemental punches, gets close combat, gets Flare Blitz, good against Roark, Gardenia, Maylene, Byron, Candace, Aaron, Lucian to some degree, Cynthia's Roserade, all really good. Definitely an S tier encounter. Empoleon sits somewhere in between Infernape and Torterra. I think it's about A tier because it is extremely good late game. Like, once you get Empoleon, it's insane. Water Steel is such an insane defensive combo that it resists so many types. Steel types you'll find in Pokemon Platinum are just really, really good. We'll get to why that is later. But the only problem with the Piplup line is that until level 19 where you get Bubble Beam, Bubble is your only stab move, and at base 20 power it really doesn't hit that hard. But still, it's good against... It's still good against Roark, it's still good against Wake if you can teach it Grass Knot. You have your Ice Beam TMs, this is a great candidate for the Ice Beam TM. You can teach it Grass Knot, teach it Flash Cannon, Surf's a really good stab move. It walls so much in the Elite Four. Aaron can't touch you, you destroy Bertha, you destroy Flint. Lucian can't touch you either, except with Gallade, but you can forget about that. And if you need like a solid Spiritomb counter, Empoleon's not a bad lead-off against Cynthia. It could even, in a pinch, if you give it enough defense EVs, it could even take on Garchomp with Ice Beam. Definitely A tier encounter. That's what I love about Sinnoh. All the starters are extremely viable, even though Infernape is the best. Staraptor is A tier, simply because it's fast, it's strong, it gets Intimidate. It's the earliest Pokemon you could get with Intimidate. Level 14 is the Staravia, which is absolutely crazy, and it is also just... it's basically a guaranteed encounter. Everybody has a Starling in the team. You've used it before. Return TM you get from Rowan. You can teach it that. Brave Bird, Close Combat. You can teach it the Roost TM. It just does so much damage. Having an Intimidate mod is insanely easy. And it's really good. It's insanely easy to have. And what's also really good about having an Intimidate mod that early is that you can actually build a really nice defense core. Defensive Intimidate core with it and Gyarados. Just watch out for electric types, but that's why you have Torterra. So Torterra, Gyarados, Staraptor core is actually really, really good because Torterra is immune to all the electric types, and Staraptor and Gyarados really put in work with Intimidate. Speaking of which, I'm going to skip around a little bit. Gyarados, speaking of which, is S tier. Is a guaranteed encounter with Old Rod in Twin Leaf Town. It does so much work. I think it's actually above Infernape because it's a guaranteed encounter. It does so much work. Level up your Magikarp to level 20 before the Mars fight. Get that. It's good against Jupiter's Skuntank. It's good against Fantina with Bite. It can do work against Maylene. It can do work against Wake. It's good against Byron. It's great against Candace because it gets Rain Dance to the level cap, which is level 44. So if you need a way to counter Snowcloak Frostlass, use Gyarados, because it can survive a blizzard, and you can set up the rain, and it gets Dragon Dance, it gets Ice Fang, it can beat Cynthia's Garchomp, it is just an insane encounter. You should be using a Gyarados every single time you play through Pokemon Platinum. Bibarel is going to be our first B tier encounter. Don't sleep on Bibarel. Early stab headbutt is actually pretty good. And also, I mean, you're probably going to use a Bibarel anyways just because it learns every single HM that you need to traverse through Platinum. But it actually can do some decent damage. Give it a Rossberry, it can do some work against Fantina, it can do work against Wake, it can do work against Byron, it can do work against Candace if you just need something that resists ice type attacks. Don't sleep on Bibarel, use it. It's pretty good. Kricketune is F tier. It has nice base 85 attack. You get X-Scissor so late in the game that it's not worth it. Bug types don't really do that well in Sinnoh, because there's a lot of rock types, there's a lot of steel types, there's a lot of flying types. So, and poison types, Bug just is not a good offensive typing. The only gym it can kind of do work against is Gardenia if you really need something to take out Turtwig and Cherum and Baby Roserade, it can do some work, but after that it just falls off so completely. Luxray is also B tier. It's strong. If it has Intimidate, it is definitely above Bibarel, but if it has Rivalry, it's slightly less than Bibarel. But even male rivalry is good. If you have female rivalry, it's really not good because Pokemon does this thing where most of the trainer Pokemon are the same gender as the trainer. So female rivalry Shinx is not good. However, Luxray, it's still pretty good. Electric type's a good offensive typing. It's just a little bit slow, but I mean, you're probably gonna get a Shinx anyways. If it has Intimidate, you put it in this nice Intimidate core here and have 3 Intimidate Mons. Just it can do some crazy things. So for this tier list, I'm going to be ranking all the trade evolutions if you are playing with them, but I'm also going to be ranking all the unevolved forms as well. Kadabra is definitely B tier. I think it's above Bibarel. It's fast, it's strong. You can get Kadabra super easily. Beats Gardenia, beats Maylene, teaches Shockwave. It can put in work against Wake. But after that, it kind of falls off. Psychic's not the best typing because you think about it's good. It can do work against Saturn because of his Toxic Croak, but that there's not really much it does past that. Doesn't really do well against Cyrus. And even in the league, it's not that great. Alakazam is A tier, though, just because it's so strong, it's so fast. If you're playing with Trade Evolutions, you can get it at level 16, and it just dunks on so much of the game. Same thing with Kadabra, just much turned up to, like, 11. Roserade is interesting. It has good special attack, and decent special defense, and base 90 speed isn't that bad. The only problem with Roserade is that you kind of get it late. I mean, if you have Badoo and you friendship grind it before the first gen, Roselia absolutely dunks on Rourke. It can do work against Gardenia too, but the thing about Roserade is that you always can get a Shiny Stone as either a level 40 plus pickup mon, like Ambipom or Pachirisu, or you get the Shiny Stone in Iron Island, and that's a little bit too late. Grass types aren't, like, the best in Sinnoh, just because there's a lot of flying types, and there's some psychic types you have to deal with, although it's not terrible. I think it's above Luxray. You just have to put a lot of resources into it. That's the only problem. And resources are limited in this game because not all the TMs are refundable like they are in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but it still has its place. I think if you could do a lot worse with grass types. We'll get to the worst grass types, trust me. Crobat is S tier. It is such a good encounter. Dunks on Gardenia, dunks on Fantina because it gets Bite, dunks on Maylene. It just does so much work in a game. It resists every single fighting type Pokemon that you fight because Poison Flying's an insane defensive typing. It actually doesn't have that bad of bulk either. Plus it gets some very interesting moves. You can get a Heart Scout from the underground, teach it Cross Poison. There's nothing that can be outspeeding a Crobat. Plus you can get it so early at level 23. Definitely use Crobat on your team. Graveler. Graveler is great. Geodude and Graveler are great early game. It's just that it falls off so hard late game. I mean, it's not the worst ground type that there is. If you really need a Vulcan counter and a Byron counter, it can do some work. The problem is I think there's better ground types like Torterra and Hippowdon and stuff like that. We'll get to Hippowdon later. It's not bad. Golem is better than Graveler just because it is stronger. It's a little bit bulkier, but it still has the same problems as Graveler. I mean, there's a lot worse you can do than Graveler. It's good against the Mars fight and the Jupiter fight just because of its very high defense. But past that, once it gets to like Fantina, Maylene, and Wake, it just falls off. It's also no help against Candace. It can do some work against Volkner. Onyx, there's only one reason to catch an Onyx, and it's say get a Geodude in Ravage Path, a Zubat in Orberg Gate, Bronzor in Route 207, and if you catch all three of those, you will have a guaranteed Gibble encounter in Wayward Cape. That is the only reason you should be using Onyx, is to catch it so you can guarantee a Gibble encounter. I mean, Onyx does have its use. It's good for the first Mars fight, just because it walls that Purugly completely, but past that, it's not great. There's a lot better that you can do. Steelix is really good. If you are playing with trade evolutions, you can get Steelix really early, before the second gym, because you can thief off Metal Coats from Wild Bronzor, or just catch one with it. And it actually puts in a lot of work. It's one of the earliest Steel types you can get. And if you get it that early, you can definitely use it against Fantina. And it actually puts in work. You can even work against Byron, because with Earthquake. Even if you don't play with it and get it from like Iron Island, that's not a bad encounter. Steel types are really good. It has really high defense, so you can put in work against Aaron. If you need a steel type for the league, it can do things against Lucian and Spirit Tomb. The only problem is that Steel Ground just isn't the best defensive typing, but it still has its place. Rampardos, I think, is C tier. It has such strong attack, but the problem is that it's just a little too slow and just a little bit too frail. I mean, if you really need an Earthquake user, you can use Rampardos, just because it's frail, it's slow. Rock isn't that great of an offensive type in Sinnoh, despite all the flying types, because usually the flying types you face are like your rival with Staraptor, who has close combat. It just gets outsped. It doesn't really do well against any of the gyms either for when you get it. I guess it can do work against Candace, but, like, there's better Candace counters. Bastiodon, I think, is actually slightly more viable than Rampardos. Steel Rock, it might seem like a really bad defensive typing, but it can actually put in some work in the game. I think it's actually really good for when you get it in the game, because level 20, if also level 30, it's not bad. You can get it before Fantina, you can wall that. You can use it as a Stealth Rock setter. It gets Taunt for that Frostlass, because that Frostlass can't touch you. It definitely has its place in the game. The only downside of Bastiodon is that it really can't deal any damage, but other than that, it's not the worst encounter. Of course, with the fossils, it's dependent on your trainer ID, whether it is even or odd. I'll put right here now on the screen which one is which, but it's not the worst you could do. There's definitely worse Pokemon you can get if you just need a basic wall. You can also do some work against Aaron as well, and maybe even Lucian. Machoke. If you have Guts Machoke, it's really good. No Guard Machoke's a little bit less viable. I mean, it's fine. It's a little slow, and you can do better at fighting types that are just faster, like Infernape, but it's not the worst Pokemon you can get. I mean, Machop is really good for Rourke if you chose Chimchar and you're just like, I don't trust my Monferno to do this, because you can get that. Although I think it is much more worth it to catch a Machop than trade it for the Abra in Orberg City to get an Abra, because Abra is just a lot better, but Machoke has its place. There's a decent amount of skill types and rock types you'll fight, and you can do some damage with that. Again, if you really need a Guts attacker, you can do that, but unfortunately it's just a little bit too slow to really do anything. That's why I think it's like the bottom of B tier. Machamp is like, I think Machamp is slightly more viable than Luxray, because it's basically Machoke just stronger. Again, if it just had Guts, it'd be great, because No Guard isn't terrific as an ability, but it can do some work. It's bulky enough that you can survive a hit from Candace's Pokemon, Oko them, and whatnot. It does not get any priority, and because of that and how other fighting types have priority, it's still B tier. Golduck's pretty solid. It's like Bibarel, just slightly better. If only it had like Psychic Stab like it does in a bunch of ROM hacks, it'd be a little bit better. It just needs a little bit more speed, but there's a lot worse you can do for water types. We haven't even gotten to Seeking yet. But, you know, Golduck definitely has its spot in the game. Wormadam. Wormadam is bad. Here's the ranking of Wormadams. You got Bug Steel Wormadam, Bug Ground Wormadam, Bug Grass Wormadam. It has good special defense, but it can't use it, because getting a Burmy from your Honey Tree encounter is not great. It does not do well against any of the gyms for when you get it. I guess it can put in work against Gardenia's first two types, but yeah, you're not really going to be using this at all. You can use it against Gardenia, but that's about it. It's slightly more viable than Kricketune just because, like, Bug and Grass at least has some good stab, so it's not terrible. Mothim is pretty good. And by that, I mean it's bad. It's slightly better than Wormadam. It has base 97 attack and special attack, which is really nice, but Bug Flying just is not that great of a type. Do not use this. Beautifly, despite it being a Bug Flying type, I think that Beautifly actually has some use. You can get Wurmple before the first gym, and because of that, it's good against Rourke. And that's why it gets C tier, and it is out of F tier. I think it has its place against Rourke, and it has its place against Gardenia, but after that, it falls off completely, but it's good for those two fights, because of that, I think it's actually better than Rampardos. Dustox is a little bit worse than Beautifly, just because it doesn't do well against Rourke without Absorb, but it's still pretty good against Gardenia. It does get Moonlight and Protect by level up, so if you need a Protect Mon, it does have that, which is pretty nice. But past that, it's not the best option you could have, but it's not the worst option. Oh, Vespiquen, you're probably not getting a female Combi from your Honey Tree encounters in Florarumba Meadows, and even if you do, I've used Vespiquen before in a Hardcore Nuzlocke, it's just not good. You get it before Gardenia, and I guess it can put in some work against Gardenia. It's somewhat defensive, but you're just not getting it, so it's going to go into F tier. Pachirisu is one of the few electric types in this game, because there's only... People like to joke about how there's few fire types in Sinnoh. There's really not that many electric types either. Pachirisu, unfortunately, is the worst of the electric types. Even though it is a world champion, it has its place there. It's just a little... It just doesn't do that much damage. There's one double... There's like the one force double battle everybody knows is Mars and Jupiter on Spear Pillar, but Pachirisu is only good against the Golbats. It's not good against anything else. I mean, for early game, it's fine. It just doesn't... You can use it against Wake, but other than that, it's just not good. You can have it as a pickup mod. Floatzel's pretty good. Floatzel's fast. It's strong. Gets Crunch at level 26 when it evolves. And that's right at the Fantina level cap, so if you need something to take care of Fantina, it's really good there. It's faster than Mismagius. It is a fast, strong, but frail water-type attacker. Definitely could do a lot worse. It's basically like Budget Gyarados. It's not as strong, but it's slightly faster. Definitely worth a look at, though, if you get a Weasel. Don't trade it for the chat on Eternity. We'll get the chat on, but please don't do it. Cherrim is not great. It's good against Wake, maybe, because it can set up Sunny Day. And for that, it's slightly better than Beautifly and Dustox, because you can somewhat use it in the later game. But, like, past that, it just does not do anything. If you really need a grass type, just get a Roselia, I guess. Gastrodon is A tier. Gastrodon is such a good Pokemon. Even without Gen 5 Storm Drain, Gastrodon is still an insane Pokemon. It's a good use of your Earthquake TM that you get from Wayward Cave. It's a good use of the Ice Beam TM. Gets Rain Dance. Evolves pretty early. Good against Maylene. It's good against Byron. You can use it against Candace. Good against Volkner. Good against Bertha. Good against Flint. It is an insane encounter. Absolutely use it. It is really, really good. It may seem not that bulky, but it could take a hit or two. Like, I've used it to OHKO Cynthia's Garchomp. It can work. Heracross is good if you can get it. The problem is you're probably not going to get it. So, unfortunately, I think Heracross is... Because it would be A tier if you get it more consistently, but because you can't, I think it's like the top of B tier. If you can get it, especially like you can get it before the Mars fight, it absolutely dunks on Perugly. It can do work against this Jupiter Skuntank. It gets Aerial Ace at level 19, so it can do work against Gardenia. But past that, it's not good against Fantina. It can do some work against Maylene. Not good. It's fine against Wake. It's good against Byron. And you know, it can do some things against Candace. Just watch out for that Frostlass. It has its place. You're just probably not going to get it. Though, if you have it, not a bad encounter. If you can get it more consistently, I think I'd put it in A tier. But for right now, top of B tier is where it is. Ambipom is fast and somewhat strong. And that's still something. It can, you got 2 return TMs, you can teach one of them to Ambipom, and it's not bad. I think it's slightly better than Bibarel just because it does a little bit more damage, even though it doesn't really get Swords Dance. Plus, like it is a pickup mon, although it has Runaway sometimes, so it's not terrific. but it can do some work against some trainers. It's just like not great for the gym challenge, but there's worse you can do. It also evolves kind of late. Apom's not a great attacker, and Ambipom's just a slightly better. And yeah, it has its place. It's still B tier. Drifblim has 3 immunities, which is really nice. It also gets Stockpile and Baton Pass. It is also the earliest ghost type you can get if you delay Valley Windworks until a Friday, so it definitely has its place. It's surprisingly bulky too. Base 150 HP is nothing to scoff at. I think it's slightly better than Ambipom just because it has those immunities, which is really nice, a good amount of resistances. Although it's not really great. It's good against Maylene, and that's really it. Unfortunately, it kind of falls off a little bit late game. You can use it against Lucian if you really want to use your Shadow Ball TM on it. It has its place. Lopunny is surprisingly good. I've used Lopunny in a Hardcore Nuzlocke. If you get it before you get a Banir at level 12 in Eternal Forest and get it to Friendship Evolve before level 13 so it can learn Return naturally, it can actually put in some work. It's fast. It can take a decent hit. The only problem is that it falls off so much late game, but it has its place. I think it sits at the bottom of B tier. It's not the worst Pokemon you can have against the Elemental Punches after all. It's just not as strong as it is in, like, say, some sort of ROM hacks like Renegade Platinum, but it has its place. Haunter has its place. Of course, you can get it basically guaranteed from the old Chateau, which is really nice. It resists, grass and poison, so you can do work against Gardenia. If you really need something for Fantina, it could work. I just won't suggest it just because Haunter's moveset is kind of trash. It gets Shadow Ball kind of late. Other than that, it gets physical Shadow type attacks like Lick, and Shadow Punch, and Shadow Claw. It has its place. It also is like Drifblim and has 3 immunities, so it has its place. It's pretty. Gengar. And, if you really need to, use your Thunderbolt TM, it's not a bad recipient of Thunderbolt. It gets some good things. Sludge Bomb, too. Gengar is basically Haunter, but better. It's faster and stronger. The only problem with Haunter and Gengar is that you have to invest so many resources into it. Yeah, you can grind for multiple Thunderbolt TMs if you really need a counter for Wake. But, it's fast and strong, so it has its place. Especially if you get Gengar before Fantina, it's really good. And it can do work against Maylene. If you teach Thunderbolt, it can do things against Wake. Just watch out for Floatzel's Crunch. It does good against all the Golbats that you fight. And it has its place. I just think that you have to invest a lot of resources into it for it to be good. And because of that, it's not terrific. Seaking, we're going to skip over Mismagius, Honchkrow, Purugly, and Skuntank because you cannot get them in Platinum. And because of that, Seaking is not bad. It's not great. There's a lot better water types you can get. Golduck's a much better water type. You can get this kind of guaranteed as a good rod encounter in Celestic Town. Though, there's so many better water types than Seaking. Yeah, it gets Waterfall by level up, but, it's not that good. You don't really fight that many things with Seaking, or even that many trainers with Seaking, because it is just that trash. Wishcash is pretty good. Water Ground's a good typing. You can get this from Eternus City with the good rod if you really don't want to use the Togepi encounter for some reason. It has its place against Bertha and Volkner and Byron. It has its place. I think it's because it's Water Ground, I think it's better than Haunter. It has its immunity. It has immunities. I think it's there. Yeah, it's a little bit above Drifblim. Chimecho. If you really want to use Psychic type for Gardenia, this is Rose Raid. Definitely you can use Chimecho, I guess. It's not good, though. It's too slow. It's too frail. It can put in some work, I guess. It does get Yawn and Early Confusion. If you really need it for Gardenia, it can work. It can kind of work against Maylene, but after that, it just falls off completely. Medicham. This is the first generation where Medicham is actually, very usable. Pure Power is insane. The only problem with Medicham is that, once you get Meta-type for, Route 207, if you get it from there, it just does not have a good learn set. You do have to invest some resources, like getting some shards for the move tutors and Route 212 to teach the elemental punches. So it kind of falls into the Haunter Gengar problem where you need a lot of resources. But if you have those resources, definitely use it. It can put in work against Maylene. It can put in work against Byron, Candace, Volkner. A little bit. Not really Volkner, but it has its place. Bronzong, I think, is S tier. Bronzong is absolutely insane defensive typing. If it has Heat Proof, you can make the argument for A tier just because it doesn't have the ground immunity, but if it has Levitate, it is definitely S tier. I've used Bronzong so much, it puts in so much work. Even Bronzor puts in work. You know, Bronzor can't really do that much damage. It still puts in work with Hypnosis and Confuse Ray. It even gets extra sensory, which is really good stab for that early in the game. Plus, like, if you really get the Wayward, if you don't get all the Wayward Cave encounters for Gibble and get a Bronzor instead, I still think put that Bronzor on your team. It will put in work. Good against Maylene. With the ground immunity, it's good for Wake. It's good against Candace. It can do work against Aaron and Bertha if it has Levitate. It gets Rain Dance. It gets Sunny Day. It gets a lot of utility. Definitely use Bronzong. Rapidash is pretty good. I mean, people don't like using Rapidash because it's a little bit frail, but it's fast and it's strong. Gets pretty early Fire Blast and can put in work against Candace. It's like, Ponyta's not a bad encounter to get for Gardenia. It can do work against, like, Maylene's Lucario. It can do work against all the Bronzors that you fight from the Galactic Commanders. It has its place. I think it's there just because I think it's above Golem just because, like, it's a fast fire type. It does damage. That's all you really need fire types to do. Sudowoodo, for when you get it in the game, I think is C tier. You just get it a little too late for it to be useful, because, like, it can put in some work against Candace, although, like, you're facing off against Frostlass, which is faster than you. Facing off against, like, Bomb of Snow, which can OHKO you. You're facing off against Piloswine, which can OHKO you. It's just, it's not good for when you get it in the game. If you got it earlier, it might be useful as, like, a little bit of a wall, but before that, I think it's C tier. Mr. Mime is slightly better. It has its utility. It gets Light Screen and Reflect and some other fun. It gets Encore, actually. Get it Encore, and it actually, because of that, I think it's actually slightly more valuable than Ambipom. And it's not bad. Get around 218, which is kind of late. It doesn't really do well against any of the gyms. I think it's there, actually. Blissey is S tier. Blissey is an S tier encounter. It invalidates half the game. If you know your opponent only has special moves, use a Blissey. It is insane. Use it all the time. Clefable. Clefable gets Magic Guard, which is pretty nice. Not getting damage from, like, Hail is pretty nice. You can teach it Flamethrower if you really want to for Candace. The other problem is that, like, just, like, Mono Normal is not that good of a type in Sinnoh. There's a lot of Rock and Steel types you have to deal with. But it has its place. I think it's slightly better than Ambipom just because it gets more utility, but other than that, it's not great. Chatot is C tier. It's good if you really want to trade your Buizel and Eterna City for it. I guess you can make it happen, but it's just not that great. Late game, Staraptor is sitting right there. It's stronger and it's faster. I mean, yeah, Chatot gets Chatter, which is a cool gimmick, but that's about it. Raichu, I think, is better than Luxray. Why? Because if you catch a Pichu from the Trophy Garden, it gets Nasty Plot, which is absolutely insane, and it gets early Thunderbolt. It's good against your rivals, Staraptor. It's good against Cyrus's team. It can put in work against Wake because you get a Thunderstone at Slaceon Ruins. And for that, I think it is actually top of B. It's near the top of B tier. It's definitely more viable than Luxray just because it's faster. It doesn't have as much utility as Luxray because Luxray gets the Elemental Fangs, but it has its place. Noctowl is like bottom of B tier. It's good against Gardenia. It can put in some work against Fantina because it's resistant. Because it's immune to all the ghost types, and if you really need a Maylene counter, it's not the worst you could do. I think it's above Lopunny, actually. You're going to skip Spiritomb because you're not getting it on a normal playthrough of Pokemon Platinum. Garchomp is probably the best Pokemon in the game. You can get it in Wayward Cave or in Victory Road. Even if you get it at Victory Road, it's like your last encounter before the league. It does so much work in the Elite Four. And even if you get it early, good against Maylene, good against Byron, good against Volkner, good against Bertha, good against Flint. Actually, not really Bertha. It can, if you do Flamethrower, it can do work against Aaron. It can do work against Lucian. You can give it some speed EVs, outspeed the other Cynthia's Garchomp and OHKO it. It just does so much work. It's so bulky. It's so fast. Base 102 speed, base 130 attack. Give it your Earthquake TM because it doesn't learn Earthquake by level up for some reason. It's just insane. Snorlax. If you get a Snorlax, it is definitely A tier. 100%. It's really bulky. It does so much work for you. It can set up with Curse. It gets stab on a lot of really good moves like Body Slam, Return. It does a lot of work. The problem is you're probably not getting it. So because of that, I think it's slightly worse. I think it's like bottom of A tier. If you could get it more consistently, like you can in BDSP, I'd put it a lot higher, but it's still an A tier encounter. Unknown is F tier. I'm sorry. Oh wow, it can have all the hidden power types. How great. Yay. Terrific. Lucario is definitely... Lucario is A tier. I'm not going to sit here and be like Lucario isn't a good Pokemon. It is. It's strong. It's fast. You get it kind of late is the problem. Like you can get it before Byron and it puts in work against Byron and Candace, but it doesn't really do that well against the League is the problem, but it can put in a lot of work. It gets Calm Mind, it gets Extreme Speed, it gets Swords Dance. You can set up some really good sweeps with it. It's good at give it some speed EVs. It's actually pretty good against the Cyrus fight. Just keep it away, because it can outspeed with speed EVs, you can outspeed the Houndoom, with level advantage, you can do that. It definitely has its place. Quagsire is A tier as well. Just because of Water Absorb, I think it's a little bit better than Gastrodon. It also hits a little bit harder. It's not as bulky, but it puts in so much work with Water Absorb. But it also gets Damp, which isn't great as an ability, but if it has Water Absorb, it's definitely better than Gastrodon. It also hits harder with Earthquake, and gets Ice Punch from the move tutor, gets Waterfall. Use Quagsire, it puts in a lot of work. Pelipper, this isn't Renegade Platinum where Pelipper gets Drizzle. So Pelipper is just your standard water type. It can do some damage, but it's not great. I think it's like there in B tier. It's not terrible. Having a ground immunity is nice, but it just doesn't really do that well. Girafarig is not great. Normal Psychic is not really a typing you really need. I've never really seen anyone be like, yeah, Girafarig really pulled me through this really tough battle. It does get Shadow Ball and Thunderbolt, I guess, so it has its place, but like, and you can kind of guarantee it from Valor Lake Front, but other than that, it's not great. Hippowdon. I think Hippowdon is A tier. Hippowdon is so bulky. It's so good. Use it. You get it guaranteed basically from the Ruined Maniac Tunnel because he basically got it dudes before then. Gets Crunch, gets Earthquake, gets Yawn. Sand is not the best weather because there's not that many Pokemon that resist it. Although, if you do have Sand, it does set up Garchomp Sandveil, which is something to take note of because Garchomp Sandveil makes it absolutely crazy. Plus, it does a lot of work. You can get it, even Hippopotas can do work. You can use it against Byron, you can use it against Volkner, you can use it against Bertha, you can use it against Flint. It has its place in A tier, absolutely use it. The Azumarill is interesting. It doesn't have its fairy type yet, but huge power, and only half the time has huge power. So I think because of that, it's if it has huge power, it's of the upper B tier, but because like you can use like Stab Waterfall and Aqua Tail, but if it has like thick fat, it's still like fine against Candace. So I think this has its use above the barrel, but other than that, it's not great. Drapion. Drapion's pretty good. Only having a weakness to ground is really nice, because you can pivot around that pretty easily. The other problem is Drapion evolves kind of late and doesn't have the best learn set. So I think it's solidly in B tier. Toxicroak is kind of the same as Drapion's, that like you get it kind of late, but it's a decently fast fighting type. I think it's slightly worse than Drapion, because like you either get Dry Skin and it's great, or you get Anticipation and it's really not good. Because like Anticipation can be really nice if you're doing like a blind playthrough of Pokemon Platinum, but like you can just look up all the trainers and their movesets. I think it's slightly worse than Medicham, just because Medicham I think is a lot more, it's a better use of your Drain Punch TM. Carnivine is not good. It's not worth getting it in the Great Marsh. Yeah, it can do some work against Wake, I guess, because it floats above Earthquakes. But yeah, and like if you really need something, is it even good against Bertha? I think it's above. I think it's below Rampardos. It has its use, I guess, because of that Earthquake immunity. But yeah, I'd rather have Rampardos. Octillery is an interesting scenario because Octillery has a really good moveset. It just does not have the stats to back it up. I mean, you can catch a rubber rates and get Mantine, which is a much better Pokemon. I think it's slightly worse than I think it's slightly better than Pelipper, only because it gets some funky moves. But other than that, it's not terrific. Lumineon, as much as I love the Finneon line, Lumineon's not good. It gets early Gust, and it does get... However, Lumineon gets top of C tier. Why? Because it gets early Rain Dance and you can use it against Candace. It does have its use in the game. If you really need a Candace counter to get rid of the snow, think about Lumineon. You don't need it for the rest of the game past Candace, but it has its use. Tentacruel is A tier. It's bulky, it's fast, it's strong. It's a good use of your Ice Beam TM, or multiple Ice Beam TMs. I think it's the bottom of A tier just because it doesn't do that. This is not as strong as it could be, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment. Milotic. You're probably not getting a Milotic in your playthrough, but if you do get a Milotic in your playthrough, it is A tier. It's bulky, it's strong. It is a great use of your Ice Beam TM. The problem is, do you really want to delay? You would have to delay so much to get it, because you can't get it until after Byron, which sucks. But it still can put in work against Candace and Bertha and Flint. So Milotic definitely, actually, because of that, I think it's actually above Hippowdon. It definitely has its place. Mantine. Mantine is a little bit underrated. Mantine's really bulky, especially. Water Flying is not the worst type to have. It's good against Bertha for when you get it. The only problem is you get it really late. So I think it's slightly worse than the Zoomerl, because Zoomerl just has a little bit more use. Abomasnow. Hail is not really the weather condition that you want. However, like, if you really need a Bertha counter to get rid of Sandstorm from that Hippowdon, you can do a lot worse than the Abomasnow. You can do a lot worse. I think it's slightly... I mean, Grass Ice is actually a pretty decent offensive typing. And, like, if you really need a Garchomp counter, it gets Ice Shard, which is pretty nice. And for that one use, I think it gets a little bit above Clefable. Actually, I think it's, like, above Haunter. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Weavile. Weavile is fast. Weavile is strong. It's a little frail, but, like, you know what you're getting into when you're using a Weavile. You get it kind of late is the only thing. But other than that, Weavile, pretty solid encounter. Definitely B tier. I'm not going to rank the legendaries, because if you're playing with Hardcore Nuzlocke rules, you're not going to be using legendaries. However, if you are using legendaries, Azelf is like S, Uxie is S, Mesprit is like B. You're not Dialga Pocket post game, Manaphy you're not getting. Rotom! Rotom is interesting, right? It also has the 3 immunities that Drifblim and Haunter have. You know what? And it's decently fast. Ghost Electric's a really interesting typing to play around with. Rotom is weaker and slower than Haunter. Stab Electric type moves are nice, but I'd rather have Haunter. Gliscor is A tier. Gliscor is absolutely insane. Even without Poison Heal, Gliscor puts in so much work. Ground Flying is an insane type to have. Immune to ground and electric moves is really, really good. You can get it in Route 206, and it Razor Fang you can get before Maylene. It puts in work against Maylene, puts in work against Byron. It's not a bad use of your Earthquake TM at all. Puts in work against Volkner and Bertha and Flint. Actually, for the ease of use, I think it's actually better than Snorlax, just because you get it a little... Actually, it might be even better than Torterra, because Ground Flying is a lot better type than the Ground Grass. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So here's the point. You probably saw this in the thumbnail, chat. You're like, what was that blurred out Pokemon in A tier? Why are you putting Probopass in A tier? Let me tell you. Probopass is insane. It is really, really good for a Platinum Nuzlocke, because it is a rock steel type that can actually do damage. It gets some good utility moves. It actually is insane. You get it, if you get Nosepass from Mount Coronet before Gardenia, it puts in work against Gardenia. It completely walls Jupiter's Skuntank, which could be really scary. It is a good counter for Fantina, because you will resist it. It's good for all the galactic fights, even, like, it's even good against Cyrus. You can even use it late game against Cyrus, because it walls Weavile, walls Crobat. Just watch out for Houndoom and Gyarados and Honchkrow. But it is, I think it is A tier. You don't use it that often, but it is, but if you have it, I think it is actually it's definitely worth it. Gardevoir is interesting. Because, like, you get it pretty early for... You get it before Maylene, which is really nice, because it does a lot of damage. The only problem is that it's just kind of slow, and Psychic on its own is not the best offensive typing. It's slightly better. It can do some things. I think it's slightly better than Luxray. I think it's slightly better than Luxray. Just because you could also teach it Electric-type moves, and it does some work. It gets Magical Leaf, which is really nice for Wake. It has its place. Gallade is pretty good. Fighting Psychic is another Fighting Psychic type. I guess some fun moves like Leaf Blade and Night Slash. You do have to put some resources into it, and if you get a Ralt, you have to do a little bit of waiting to get a Dawn Stone, which you get at right outside of the Story City in Route 212. But other than that, it's not bad. Definitely has its place. I think it's a little bit better than Medicham just because it's a little bit bulkier. And is it a little... I think it's a little bit faster, yeah. Or it's the same speed tier. Licky, pretty bulky. Pretty bulky normal type. It's like discount Snorlax without, you know, the absolute power, but it definitely has its place. I think it's above Golduck just because, like, it can take a lot of hits, get some fun utility moves. Level 33, it's good for just, like, getting through a bunch of trainers really fast. The only problem, actually, even with all that, I think it's like Clefable tier. It's not Snorlax tier. Can't take as many hits. Now we get to all the evolutions. If you're wondering what you should do with the free Eevee you get in Hardcore City in Pokemon Platinum, the best thing you can do is wait until you see what your team needs that Eevee to be. Because sometimes in a playthrough, you need it to be a Jolteon. Sometimes you need it to be a Vaporeon. Sometimes you need it to not be Flareon. So that's where... I'm still going to rank all the evolutions because they all have their place in the game. But here is where they all sit. Vaporeon is bulky water type. It's basically Tentacruel, just a little bit stronger, a little bit bulkier. It's a little bit bulkier than Tentacruel. It's not as fast as Tentacruel, which kind of brings it down, but like if you really need a Garchomp counter, it's a good Pokemon. Definitely A tier. Now I think about it, Heracross gets Guts, so I think it actually goes into A tier. It actually goes into A tier. Because I forgot about Guts. Jolteon is probably... The only thing with Jolteon is that, unlike Raichu, you have to teach it Thunderbolt, because it does not get Thunderbolt until, like, really late, or is that Discharge? It doesn't get a special Electric-type move until really late in the game, which isn't great, but it is base 130 speed, same as Crobat. It does a lot of work against Wake. It does a lot of work against Cyrus's team. It has its place. It's slightly better than Raichu, but just because it doesn't have as many coverage moves, I think it doesn't get out into A tier, unfortunately. Flareon is like B tier, like lower B tier, just because like Fire Fang is your best physical fire type move that you're getting. I mean, like, it's still like somewhat bulky especially, but it's just not great. Espeon is like Gardevoir, just stronger but frailer, so it's like in the same place. Gets Morning Sun actually, so I think it's like there. Umbreon is A tier. Dark types are really good. Dark types are really good. Especially with those stats. Really bulky, gets toxic. You can teach it the Toxic TM, which protects Stall. Definitely use Umbreon if you need it. Leafeon, unfortunately, does not get Leaf Blade until very late. It still has a decent defense. It's like slightly worse than Abomasnow. It's like slightly worse. I think it's a little better than Ambipom. Yeah, like there. In Glaceon, unfortunately, you get a little bit too late, and there's better ice types. And just because it gets Ice Beam and Shadow Ball, and that's like its only coverage moves, I think it still has its place if you really need something for ice types. I guess if you really need something for Bertha, it can do some things with Snowcloak with Abomasnow. And I think it's slightly better than Flareon. Altaria, as the only other Dragon type other than Garchomp, has its place because Dragon has a lot of neat resistances. You get it kind of late because like it's not good against Byron, it's not good against Candace, it's not really good against Vulcaner either. Just because of when you get it in the game, you get it like after all the gym badges that it would be useful for. I mean, it can do work against Bertha, I guess. I think it's a little worse than Clefable. Togekiss is A tier. If it has Hustle, it's a lower A tier. If it has Serene Grace, it is higher A tier. Even with Hustle, Air Slash, if it has Serene Grace and Air Slash, it is insanely good. It's a guaranteed encounter because you get the free Togepi egg from Cynthia in Eterna City, which is really nice. It definitely has its place. in A tier. Houndoom is pretty good. Fast, strong, good use of your flamethrower TM. You can get Dark Pulse TM to Victory Road, pretty good. And it also completely walls Candace's Frostlass. Actually, I think it's like there. Because of that, I think it's actually like there. Yeah. I think it's like there. Magnezone is absolutely insane. Magnezone is such a good encounter. Magnezone has its place in A tier because Electric Seal is a really good defensive typing. You can teach it Flash Cannon, teach it Thunderbolt. It is surprisingly bulky. Even though Sturdy doesn't work, you can get Magnet Pull, which is really nice for getting more Steel types. You know, you get it like after all the Steel types you would really need Magnet Pull for. But it has its place. It's bulky, it's strong. Definitely A tier. If only Sturdy blocked all moves from OHKOing and just keep it away from ground types. Don't use it against Bertha. It has its place. It can resist all the psychic types for Lucian and Aaron. It has its place on Elite Four teams. It's also decent against Milotic because Milo can't really touch it other than like a Surf. Pretty good. Tangrowth is surprisingly bulky. The other problem is you're probably not getting a Tangela from the Great Marsh, but it's pretty physically bulky and gets some really interesting moves. If you really keep your Earthquake TM until like the last second, you're like, man, I want to teach Earthquake to something. I think it's slightly better than Licky Licky, because Grass is a little bit better. It gets Sleep Powder, which puts it actually like above the Haunter for me. But just because like it's still Tangrowth, it's not great. Yanmega is also interesting. You're probably not going to get Yanmega from the Great Marsh, but if you get it, Speed Boost is pretty nice. Tinted Lens is also really nice, but like Bug Flying just is not a great attacking type in this game. I think it's like slightly worse than Altaria. So it's a little better than Leafeon. Tropius is like C tier. No one uses don't use Tropius. It has nothing going for it. Rhydon is, you get it at a very interesting time. It's good for Volkner and for Flint because it resists fire. Because of that, it has its place on late game teams. I think it's slightly worse than Gengar, but it could do worse. Rhyperior is just a little bit better than Rhydon just because it has the strongest Earthquake in the game. And it's good against Aaron, it's good against Flint. Just watch out for all the Solar Beams. I think it's slightly better than Gengar, but if you're not playing Trade Evolutions, Rhydon's not terrible. It's better than Golem just because it's slightly stronger. And gets, it's slightly stronger. Golem's a little faster, but Rhydon's a little stronger. Actually, I think it's more like this. Rapidash is better. And then Rhyperior is like there. Yeah. Dusclops is bulky. That's really all it's got going for it. It gets some interesting moves. It gets Earthquake and Ice Beam for some reason. So it's bulky. It's like Tangrowth level. It's about there, I'd say. It's not terrible. It could do a lot worse. Dusknoir is Dusclops, but bulkier. Gets fun moves with the elemental punches. It's not terrible. It's a little worse than Driplet. It's a little bit better than Tangrowth, a little worse than the Bombstone. Bombstone has a little bit more utility. Porygon 2 is definitely high B tier. Like high B tier. It's bulky, gets insane moves. If you get download on it, it's guaranteed in Veilstone City. You're not getting another encounter in Veilstone City, so Porygon's guaranteed. Porygon's not on this list, but don't use Porygon. It's definitely F tier. Porygon 2 has its place, and Porygon Z is not as bulky as Porygon 2, but it is a lot stronger. It actually is decently fast. Base 90 speed is not bad. Gets Ice Beam and Thunderbolt and Tri-Attack. Pretty good. Yeah, it either has Adaptability, which is amazing, or for Tri-Attack, or Download, which is also amazing. You should use Porygon Z if you're doing it. Definitely worth it. Scizor's A tier. I'm not gonna josh you and say like Scizor is bad or anything. Scizor is amazing. Only weak to fire. Really good. You can, especially if you get a Scyther Technician and Bullet Punch, it does so much work. It is so good. Please use Scizor if you can. Definitely A tier. Electabuzz, you get it pretty late, and like it's good for Route 222, and like that's it. And Route 220, it's good for Route 222 and Route 223, and that's like it because you get it in Route 222. I mean, there's a lot worse you can do. I think just because it's not guaranteed, like it is Rotom, it's slightly below Rotom. I think it's still a fast electric type. It gets Psychic. I think it's above Altaria. Electivire gets Motor Drives. You can set up against Volkner with it, which is really funny, and it has its place. I think it's slightly better than than Dusclops, but not as good as Tangrowth. Magmar, you can get it before Byron, and it puts in work against Byron's gym. That's not bad. And it can also do Candace. I think it's slightly better than Electivire, just because like it has its utility. And Magmortar is just stronger but slower. But like you're getting outsped for most things, so I think it's actually like, there actually. Yeah. Mammoth Swine is A tier. Ground Ice is an insane stab combo to have. It is really good, really strong. Definitely a good candidate for your Earthquake TM. Puts in work against Volkner, puts in work against Bertha, puts in work against Flint. Even though it doesn't really get thick fat, it can put in work. Puts in work against Lucian, and it can do things against Garchomp. Definitely A tier. Really good. Glalie sucks. I'm sorry. There's better ice types you can get. Glalie, I mean, like, it's an ice type, but it's just, its stats are just not that good. It's like there. Frostlass is interesting. Ice Ghost is a really insane typing, plus it gets Ice Shard. It's actually just as strong as Glalie because it has the exact same attack and special attack. But because it has an immunity and gets Shadow Ball and Snow Cloak, if you really want to set the Hail Team with a Bomb of Snow, I think it's not as strong as a Bomb of Snow, so I think it's like I think it's a little bit worse than, I think it's a little bit better than Licky Licky, just because having immunities is really nice. And finally, Absol. Absol is, for the time you get it in the game, it's good against Lucian, and not even then, because it gets outsped by Gallade. Unless you really give it speed EVs, so it's like there. And that's it. Yeah, that's it. That is the tier list of all the encounters to use in Pokemon Platinum. You have your S tier, your A tier, your big B tier, your C tier, and your F tier. If you have Giratina, it's S. If you are catching Giratina, it's S tier. Absolutely insane Pokemon. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Tell me in the comments how wrong I am for putting Probopass in A tier, or if I put some Pokemon you didn't like in a tier. Tell me how wrong I am in the comments. And hopefully this is a nice resource for you if you ever want to hardcore Nuzlocke Pokemon Platinum. Check me out on Twitch. I stream every day. I stream every day, and, you know, alright, awesome. I will see you around.